morning, my students. I wish you are okay. Today, I think we are going to continue our discussion of the slave narratives. Last time, we looked at the first few chapters, and we saw how, Douglas cleverly exposed the ideology, the institution of slavery, by showing how that institution was deliberate, or that ideology was deliberate. They started by denying, the slaves their identity. They were not giving them names, so they denied them education. And even they deprived them from family ties. And in the next few chapters, he exposed, or he showed us scenes from plantation, the whipping, and how those slaves were beaten as if they were animals. Even animals were better off than them. And we saw how Barney and his son, who were taking care of the horses were cared for more than human beings. Then he continued to expose the atrocities of slavers when he showed how his aunt was, whipped, and how, other slaves were even shot, killed, dead, And of course he showed us how he started to build himself by educating himself. And we saw how Mrs. Old, the lady, the mistress, who was very good, very helpful, very supportive, kind, she helped him. And but when her husband admonished her, she started to imbibe that ideology, that institution, and even she became worse than her husband, And what the point was, Douglas wanted to make is that slavery itself demonizes people. People are not demons, but it is slavery. It is this ideology. It is this institution which, look at her, she's, instinctively, a good woman, an innocent woman. But once she imbibed that ideology, she became like a demon. She became like, a monster. And I think, he was very good in exposing slavery in that way. Okay, this is, I think, the main things we discussed, and I came to give her, presentation. Today, I want, we want to continue, okay, discussing this, and I think it's chapter 5? 4. So let me, now it's your turn today to tell me, what do you see in chapter 4? What is the important quote? What is the important theme? Well, do you think this is a symbol? This is a metaphor, I think in chapter 4, the main thing is what? Yes, Sarah?
Chapter 4 is talking about the murder crimes that would torture those slaves. The first story is the story of killing Dimby, who was killed because he didn't give any response for the calling of Mr. Mr. Gobi, I think. Mr. Gobi. And the second story is the murder of his wife's cousin, who was killed by a female slaveholder because she was a slave while her baby was crying, and she didn't hurt him. So the murdering was because of
the reasons were very trivial, So it was this sadistic sentiment, this inclination to inflict the utmost suffering on those people, on the account or that they are inferior people because of their color.
Last
Yes.
one. This chapter talks about that also slavery demonizes the white little boys when they have a common saying which says, I have sent to kill a nigger and I have sent to bury
Yeah, like this shows how
also
these
the
people.
children are demonizing other slaves.
Yes, like even the children are imbibing, the ideology of slavery from the very beginning. And I think in this chapter, like we, are having Mr. Hopkins replaced by Mr. Gore, because Mr. Hopkins is not like a good practitioner of slavery. Like again, he's mocking. Now this is a kind of mocking, slavery as a kind of methodology or a kind of, practitioner in which some people excel and some people do not excel. So Gore, which is like very cruel. I mean, even the name itself, like Gore, it's very vulgar, the connotation of the name is very vulgar. So it shows how, it is something which can be trained, which can be coached. And this is something against, against the humanity. If you are coaching people how to subjugate, how to, kill, how to, torture, how to inflict the utmost suffering on those people, it means like you are doing something against the humanity. So, okay. But like, if you need, like, I need you to quote more quotes, because this is not enough. Like, chapter 4, I have a lot of quotes, I think. Uh-huh. Yes. Yes, Ihsan.
And there is 184, the second paragraph.
It starts with what?
I speak advisedly when I say this, that killing a slave or any colored person in Tablet County, Maryland, is not treated as a crime either by the courts or the community. I think this is really important because it emphasizes that society was an institution, that slavery was an institution in that society.
Yes, and like, yes, it shows how the legal system was biased. It shows how the whole, like it supports slavery. Like slavery was something legalized, something legal, and it shows how the law was double standard. Because if you are dealing people because of their color, like you are, okay. So this is, no punishment for white murders. This reminds us, like, of, you remember, the Israelis when they killed Palestinians. All the time, they found ways of acquitting, the settlers. They found ways of proving that they were innocent, that they didn't do that with premeditation, like what happened in Hebron when, a settler killed more than 28 people, and they said, like, he was insane. The same thing, like when they killed 19, Palestinian, and they said also he was insane. So they found new ways. This shows how, like, they were very lenient. Like they didn't take that to court very seriously. I mean, the issue to court very seriously. The same is happening here. Okay, so when a black one is killed, it's not a big deal. You can, as she said, like here, you can pay as half a cent, for killing and half a cent for burying. Yes, please.
I wanted to say that the Israelis do this even with the American people when they killed the
Yeah, yeah.
They said the same thing, that she put herself in front of the tanker.
The tank, yeah. She endangered herself. And that was not an excuse. She was, Rachel Corrie was, a supporter of the Palestinians. She came and she protested against, colonization. She protested against, like, house demolition. And, like, it was very, like, inhumane, like, to kill her in cold blood. This is what happened, Again, it's like the Israelis did that with the Americans themselves, Okay, good. Yes, please.
In page 121, when he said, if one slave refused to be corrected and escaped with his life, the other slaves would soon copy the example. And this reflects how the freedom is forbidden because one just taught.
Yeah. So you should be like very tough right from the very beginning.
You kill him as an example for the others.
Okay, let's move because I don't see like more like extracts to comment on, unless you want. What about chapter 5? I think chapter 5 is very, interesting. It talks about the food
Yeah, the food and cold.
and what?
How he was hungry and cold. And still back to escape. Cold. Being cold.
Being caught because he tried to escape. Okay, but let's take the one about food. Like what kind of food they were given. We were not regularly allowance. Our food was coarse corn, meal boiled. This was called mush. It was put into a large wooden tray or trough and set down upon the ground. The children were then called like so many pigs. And like so many pigs. Look here, juxtaposing human beings with, pigs with animals is also a tactic of arousing, sympathy for and exposing the atrocities of slavery. Like because here, in the eyes of the white people or in the eyes of the racist, I don't want to say the white because, the racist of those time, not everybody white is racist. And I think this message wanted to be conveyed by Douglas himself because he thought that there are many white people who are supporters of, the cause of the black people. Okay, I think in this chapter he was given to Mr. Old, and in this chapter I think he started like to learn how to read.
How to read, just not to write.
Yeah, like yes. So how to read, and yes, she started, and I think one of the important themes here is education because in order to gain your freedom, you need two things. You need
To free your mind first.
like to be educated, and you need to have power. And of course, those two things were denied. I mean, the black people were denied those two things. They were denied education because education is the opposite of ignorance. Education would alert them. Education would make them conscious of their, the pet they are living in, because he mentioned it, the pet. I like this analogy, and he mentioned later, this knowledge, this education made me aware of, the reality of the life of slaves.
He said, brightening up my pathway.
Yes. Okay. So I think it's very interesting, but like, what else, In this chapter, like, yes.
Teacher.
Uh-huh.
Yes, teacher.
Yes.
This chapter talks about Douglas as an innocent child. When he says working for the first time with the hope of reward, this is humble wish of having a trouser when it was planned to send him to Baltimore. So he was cleaning himself.
So again, like, if you want to work with the hope of getting a reward, this is like a step towards your freedom. Like, because, work was exchanged for food. Now, if you are given a reward, this means like, you are free because now you are a slave. You are a property. You shouldn't be rewarded. You are rewarded by being fed by the slaveholders. But this is very symbolic. This is very symbolic. It shows how he was aspiring for his own freedom.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Providence here is mentioned.
Yeah, the idea of God, providence, you know.
How do you
Yeah.
think that being essential of
It was, yeah.
the kind of
So those people had faith in God, you know, and later I think in the coming chapters, like those slaveholders, like you know, master, you know, I mean, one of the masters,
use the Bible and
yes, like was going to church, you know, was beating, you know, so there was like contradiction, a kind of irony. But there is interesting here metaphor in this one. Now, he was excited that he was going to Baltimore. Baltimore was a city, you know, so moving from plantation to a city. Again, like as somebody mentioned last time, we have the plantation, you know, and we have the city, you know.
Slave cities,
Yeah.
slaves are
Are much,
much more freedom.
yes, much better off. They are well treated. They are not like being whipped, at least, you know.
So Baltimore was a turning point in his
Yeah, Baltimore was a turning, but like, how did he get ready, like, to that?
He
You know?
cleaned himself.
He cleaned himself.
And when
You know?
we can refer to
He wore the trouser.
Yes. Yeah, like this is, you know, like it's like if you are cleaning, it means you are just like having a new skin, you know, because the old skin was old. It's like, this is what we call the molting metaphor. What is the molting metaphor? It's like removing of the skin. It is the beginning of rebirth. It is the beginning of leaving, you know, the past itself. It's the beginning of reinitiation. It's the beginning of his quest for freedom. So if you like you want to start your quest, you should prepare yourself for this. So this molting metaphor, it is like he's getting rid of all what has been attached to him. I mean, in terms of like slavery, like the effects of slavery. So he is very excited. He cleaned himself, you know. It's like you want to go to a new world, see? So you should leave what has been attached to slavery, you know, all the effects of this work, and go there. So he was very excited, yes. And it was a shift in his life, as you said. In what sense it was a shift in his life? Being in Baltimore. And this is, I looked upon my departure from Colonel Lloyd's plantation as one of the most interesting events in my life. It's the last paragraph. It is possible and even quite probable that, but for the mere circumstance of being removed from the plantation to Baltimore, I should have today, instead of being here, seated on my own table in the enjoyment of freedom and the happiness of home, writing this narrative, being confined in the galling chains of slavery. Going to live at Baltimore laid the foundation and opened the gate to all my subsequent prosperity. So like he had more space for freedom. He had more space, you know, to educate himself more and more. So I think this is very interesting in this chapter. Let's move to, you know, to chapter 6, I think. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
It's about the city slave and the...
It's about education? Okay. Yes, what do you want to say?
I read about the minister said to him that if you each the niggers speak of how to live, there will be no keeping him, and this reflects how the ignorance will keep them slave.
Yeah, so again, this confirms what we, you know, intuited at the beginning, if you remember, like when we read how those slaves were denied the right to have to having names and to having an age and identity. And I want like you, you know, at some point to notice, you know, later in certain chapters, I wouldn't say, like when he started to giving dates and, you know, this is very important shift. But Again here, education. Education is emancipating. Education is symbolism for emancipation. Like if you want to be emancipated, if you want to be a free person, like you should enlighten yourself. You should be educated. Yes, Sahar, if I'm not like...
Every time he's educated, he knows more about the suffering of slavery. He know more about the power of white men, and that they do not have that right to enslave white people. I like dictation when he said like, I now understand what had been to me the most perplexing difficulty to wield the white man's power to enslave the black man. It was a great achievement. Then he said, I understood the pathway from slavery to freedom. It was just what I wanted. So he knows what he wants. He knows his identity. He knows that slaves is the right thing to do.
And I like this quotation in this chapter when he said, this is an interesting paradox, you know. What he most dreaded, that I most desired. He dreaded my education and I desired my education, you know. He was talking about his master, like, you know. Okay, you see what I mean? It's a paradox which shows how those people, you know, dreaded like the education, and how the black people desired it. You see what I mean? Okay, yes.
And it's ironical that when his master forbade his wife from teaching Douglas, and he said to her that if you give an girl an inch, she will take an ill. Then Douglas says, these words sank deep into my heart, stirred up sentiments within that lay slumbering, and called into distance and entirely new print thoughts. Then finally he said, I owe almost as much to the bitter opposition of my master as to the kindly aid of my mistress. So the forbidden of his master his wife to teach Douglas gave the same benefits as if he allowed her to teach him, because he
he insisted,
he
like,
his eyes, a new idea that
so he became conscious.
this isn't the slavery institution is controlling you, and we are as slave holders. We are controlling you by ignorance. So if you learn, you are going to
So he was alerted. He came to realize that was a deliberate strategy, like to subjugate them more and more. Yes.
They know that the mind what counts, and so they control the mind and they control everything.
Yeah, if they control the mind, they control the body. So again, look here, like he wants to emancipate his mind, and later, hopefully he would emancipate his body, because his body was like an object, for like sadistic, for entertainment, because most of the whipping was for entertainment. Like some of the they were moody, they enjoyed the whipping, they enjoyed beating them. Okay, good. Like we have to speed up a little. Yes, Miss Mata.
In this chapter, I think that the master of Douglas is the one who enlightened the idea of freedom inside Douglas. That by his statement that education is dangerous for
Yeah.
In the other chapters, and the coming chapter,
So you mean like
the challenge between the master and
just articulating this made him like realize, and like at the end of the day made him very adamant, like to like fight for his right to educate himself. Okay, let's move to chapter 7. And chapter 7, I think it is a continuation like of chapter. Yes, Mr. Greed.
He expresses how slavery corrupts the morality of the white people, and he says until under its influence, the tender heart became stone, and the lamb-like disposition gave way to one tiger-like fierceness. Her heart became hard and as cruel as a tiger.
Yeah, like it shows how slavery, brutalizes, demonizes people, like people who are created. This is very interesting. As we said from the very beginning, It's something. It's an ideology. It's something taught. It's something acquired. It is not something instinct. But what happens when it is taken seriously? People are transformed into demons, monsters. Okay, good. Yes, the same. What about the other people? Like there? Okay. Yes, Ranin?
I think here something good that his witness, when his witty and smart, when the Irish men in the ship told him to run away and escape. But he thinks that maybe they are trying to trick him so that they can recapture him and get the reward. But he just keep this idea of escaping in his mind.
Yeah, excellent. Don't you think we have a major irony here in this chapter? What is the major irony? Yes, please.
That he thinks that the learning, when he said the learning to read had been a curse rather than a blessing.
Wow. How come?
Because the reading improves his skills for thinking, but at the same time he cannot do anything for freedom or to free himself.
Could you read like this exactly? Where is that?
In 22:9,
Uh-huh.
would at times feel that learning to read had been a curse rather than a blessing. It had given me a view of my wretched condition without the remedy. It opened my eyes to the horrible bit, but to not ladder upon which to get out.
Yeah. Again, like you have all these metaphors. Like, what is slavery like? If you want to look at the metaphors, what is slavery like? Slavery is like a pet. It's like a pet which is full of darkness. And in order to emancipate yourself, you need a ladder. You need a ladder to go up. Yes, he wished, like here, the irony is like, he thought of education like a curse. How come you think it is a curse? Because, when he started to read, he started to know more. He started to see the conditions of those people. Okay? So, he cleverly, if you want to be very, effective, orator, a very effective speaker, you should be very clever in using these things, these fictional elements, because I think this is a fictional work of art with all the symbolism going on, with all the metaphors. Yes, ironies.
Yes, I was much better off in this regard than many of the poor white children in our neighborhood. The bread I used to bestow upon the hungry little urchins, who in return would give me that more valuable bread of knowledge. This article that they thought that black people are like animals, but there in Baltimore, Douglas was much better than the white little kids in his neighborhood. He was better fed and he was better clothed, and he used to give them bread in order to.
Yeah, but don't you who was spelling the name? He was. What was he doing with them? Was he teaching or he was giving them bread?
He was learning from them.
Huh?
He was.
In order to learn how to write, to learn spelling. So he wanted to learn how to spell his name. Spelling the name is very symbolic, isn't it? It's it has to do with identity. If you care for your name, you care for identity. So it's very ironic. Those, the white people, they are poor, and he made that chance because he was living with, a rich family. So they had ample food. He was taking the food, and he was very clever in swapping food with knowledge. And he said, this is the bread of, I was giving them real bread, and I was taking the bread of knowledge. Again, it's another interesting metaphor. Excellent. Okay. Yes, Hassan?
I have a quote. He said, "For it is almost an unpardonable offense to teach slaves to read in this Christian country." So he is emphasizing on the word Christian, that those people are using religion to justify the bad.
Yeah, because all the time they thought that they were, the cursed people, they are the devilish, the sons of Ham who were destined to be cursed. Okay. Yes.
Last point, which is the book that affected his mind to continue this path, which is the Columbian Orator.
Yes.
This book is talking about the conversation between a master and a slave, and this conversation ends with the emancipation of the slave. So this gave him a more hope, and also gave his tongue an interesting thoughts of my own soul.
Because he knows how those people think, you know.
It gave him some tactics for the new scheme.
Okay, let's move to chapter 8. I think chapter 8 is very interesting. In this, Anthony dies, and like slaves are
Sent back to the
divided, like sent back, you know. New like condition, new living conditions. Like if your master, sometimes you feel comfortable with the master, you know. But like if a master is replaced by another one, then this is very disturbing. And you know what happened here? Like when Mr. Anthony dies, so his slaves were, they were divided. And in order to divide, you need to, to measure their value, to evaluate them. And like here, I think I didn't say he exaggerated, but he described how, they were conceived as if they were property to be valued. He was, very, very disturbed by that fact that he was conceived as a property. Okay? Yes?
In this chapter, we are introduced to two incidents that showed us as readers the barbaric and sadistic actions of the slavery institution. The first one is when they were divided between the inheritance of Captain Anthony. When they were ranked together at the evaluation, men and women, old and young, men and single, were ranked with horses, sheep, and swine. There were horses and men, cattle and women, pigs and sheep.
Yeah, like it's so this juxtaposition, again.
They have the same value as the animals. Are not
Very
not
bad.
Human.
Uh-huh.
So it shows us as readers to see how dehumanizing slavery did. The second incident is when he talked about his grandmother.
Lucretia.
When she had been the source of all his wealth. He was talking about his grandmother and how did she. She was most faithful to Captain Anthony, and she spent all her life. She was taking care of his children, grandchildren, and she ended up by being sold to new masters. Yes. And she was left in a hut. They left her in a hut in the woods and said, now you can be independent. And that was like giving her to die alone. So,
but look at him. He say, thanks to Providence, again, like we are reminded of Providence. Thanks to Providence, I fell to the portion of Mrs. Lucretia and was sent immediately back to Baltimore, to live. Like he, again, this is like very ironic, but it's like better, than being with a new master, A new master means like a new bad treatment. A new master means like a new suffering. Okay, a new separation. And I think, here the displacement is highlighted, how those families were fragmented. This reminds us of when the Duke and the King in Huckleberry Finn, fragmented the slaves. So the family structure was targeted because, as we said, right from the very beginning, the family structure is dangerous. If you realize that you belong to a family, this gives you a kind of stability, security. So they were denied all those ties deliberately, And here, look what is happening. They are fragmented. And the fragmentation, I think, in other slave narratives was, described when people were taken to auction. And, you would see a woman with a lot of her sons and, the whole family. And then one is sold to Georgia, the other is sold to Alabama, And look at the mother when she sees her, sons taken by force like this, how, sad this situation is. So I think, if you should understand this, this song, which, expresses, the real, how would a mother go and sing this? Gone, gone, sold, and, with all this feeling of suffering, pain, agony, because they're separated for it. And where are they gone? Where, to the farm, to be whipped there, and, yes. So there is sense of loss. Sense of loss here is stressed, Okay. Now let's go to chapter 9. I think chapter 9 is, Master Thomas. He's not a good one, huh? Master Thomas. He's not good. He's not good at beating. So beating should be coached very well. Again, he's making fun of this, slaveholding techniques. Like these taming techniques, beating, like you should be sadistic, you should be hard, you should be trained how to be sadistic. Yes?
Well, again, here we are introduced to the rules and codes of the slavery institution. As Mrs. Sophie Old, as she didn't hold any slaves and she didn't know how to deal with them. And then she was introduced to the slavery institution codes and rules, and then she was changed. The same thing here with Mr. Thomas, but in another different way. He wasn't a slaveholder by birth. He gained the slaves by marriage when he was married to Anthony's daughter. So when he got the slaves, he didn't know how to deal with them. So he was just more cruel and more barbaric and more sadistic.
And he didn't know how to manage them.
And his behavior was inconsistent. Sometimes he was firm as Napoleon. Another time, as if he was asking about the way. He didn't have consistent treatment as the other masters who were holding slaves.
And worse to that he was mean. He was stingy, And again, here we have the food, the food theory, because the food was taken like a theory. Like in this theory, you have either to give them the same food in ample quantities, or even to give them scant amount of food. And, as we said, by both, techniques, you end up by crushing the spirit of those people, by robbing them their dignity. Because if you give them the same food in ample quantities, like this, will make them sick of this food and, crush their spirit. And if you give them little, you force them to beg. Okay? And so, here what is happening? Yes?
And this may be another technique. If you prevent them from food, they will only think about food and they will not be able to think about something else like looking for their freedom.
But I want you, this is right, but I want you again to think of, this, because this is very symbolic. Now, you see, these slaveholders are not adopting the same. Everybody is having. This is a symbolic gesture that this institution is a dilapidating institution, or the whole hierarchy is dilapidating, and it's not going to, to continue. So it's very gesture, because you will end up by a generation who will not be able to handle, because this is, so he's doing it very well. Like those people, the slaveholders or slave holding is going to end. Okay, I think in chapter 9 we have also the development of the knowledge itself.
And we have the theme of religion again. When Mr. Thomas went to a religious seminar, and then he came back more cruel and found sanction again for his cruelty. He was just quoting from the scripture.
It's very ironic. You are.
He found sanction. He was not
What?
religious and was cruel, but when he came back with more religion, he was more cruel. So he linked his religious action with his barbaristic action, and he found sanction in religion.
I like, the quotation when he said, he made the greatest pretensions to piety. His house was the house of prayer. He prayed morning, noon, and night. He was very soon distinguished himself among his brethren and was soon made a class leader and, exhorter. He's like he was like a leader. He was like a big, Christian leader, a church leader. And now, look at him. What kind of irony is this? Like you are a leader, you are an orator, and you are still, it's very, abuse. Like those people are abusing religion, abusing religion. Okay. And I think this abuse, I have said my master found religious sanction for his cruelty. Like this is, can you spot this? I have said my master found religious sanction. As I told you, like you quoted this last time, if you remember. And sanction means permit here. Sanction for his cruelty.
As an example, I will
But there is
say,
another image about religion, which
Uh.
Mr. Kaufman, how he described him as a good man, and he sympathized with the slave.
Who?
yeah,
Mr. Kaufman,
they used to come here.
he took more notice of us than either of the other ministers, and he will not come among us without betraying his sympathy for us and
You're talking about Mr. Covey?
No, the same chapter.
Okay.
Three ministers used to come to Mr. Thomas' house
Uh-huh.
to give lectures, like or give lectures. And one of the ministers was Mr. Cookman. The other two didn't have any attention to the slaves, but Mr. Cookman, he was an abolition, but in a different way.
Yeah, so like we have two categories, like, even in this city, because we're talking about the city. Some people were fine and some people were whipping. Again, like this excitement, the excitement that he was going to Baltimore is like being made fun of here. Because, slavery is everywhere. It is in the plantation, it is in the city. Good. Now, this is like this, as we said, this chapter is the turning point of the whole narrative. Because here, he's face to face, with Covey, his oppressor, like his, chapter 10. Yeah, like chapter 10. We have the climax. What is the climax? Yeah, but Mr. Covey, like, look at the description. He was like a snake. He was like, he was very trained. He was trained. He knew how to find mistakes. He was very cruel in beating. Yeah, he was like practitioner in crushing the spirit of, those people. And like he said, I was somewhat unmanageable when I first went there, but a few months of this discipline tamed me. Look at him. This is very clever. He is like this very sarcastic. He tamed me, Like he tamed me. Like I was unmanageable. Mr. Covey succeeded in breaking me. I was broken in body and soul and the spirit. My natural elasticity was crushed. My intellect languished. This is like, a paragraph which begins, if at any one time of my life more than another. Like, this is very clever of him, like when he juxtaposed himself with the animal. Okay? The longest days were too short for him. Why? The longest days, it's a paradox. This reminds me of the paradox of Andrew Marvell's poem. We cannot stop our sun, but we can make it run. You see what I mean? So the short, we said, what is the paradox? The longest days are the shortest. Why?
Because he asked them to do so much work.
No. It's not like this. For him, the longest days are the shortest.
But he was enjoying
Aha! He was enjoying. Like when long time is short, it means you spent it in pleasure. You see what I mean? You like, and if you enjoy inflicting suffering in people, this is what we call sadism. And sadism is a psyche. Do you know that? If you are people who are sadists, they are psychotic. Okay, so here he shows it is, a matter of psyche. It's a matter of like not having confidence. It's a matter of, it's a sadist mentality. I think, he's a very good, writer, isn't he? He's a creative writer. So look here how creativity, yes, promotes your dream, promotes,
I felt as I never felt.
Yes?
I felt as I never felt before. I dwelt a glorious resurrection from the tomb of slavery to the heaven of freedom. My long crushed spirit rose. Cowardice departed. Bold defiance took its place. And I now resolved that, however long I might remain a slave in form, the day had passed forever when I could be a slave in fact. I did not hesitate to let it be known of me that the white man who expected to succeed in whipping must also succeed in killing me.
Yeah. So this is a lesson for us as Palestinian. What kind of lesson we are learning from this? Yes, Hanan?
Whenever we suffer, we have one day we will free at one day. Whenever our suffering will end, whenever our suffering will take more than needs, we will free.
Yes. To some extent, but I think, here we are reaching, yes, we have to defend ourselves. Now here, like what is being called sometimes the colonizer is stigmatizing or even describing this defense mechanism as violence or terrorism. It happens in our situation. And you cannot, education is emancipating, but it is education itself. Okay, it makes you aware. But at the end of the day, you need some, resistance, And resistance is legitimate, Resistance is legitimate, Here, he wants to, to show, it's your right to resist. It's your right to, to defend yourself. Because now, when he knocked down Covey, he didn't attack him. He was defending himself. He was defending himself.
And the most important that be free in spirit is much in God. He said that even if I give the slave by body, but my spirit is free and just a matter of time to be free.
But what is the major symbol running here? What is the major symbol in this chapter? Don't you see, there is again symbolism of rebirth? Yes, you are reborn. It's resurrection. He was talking about my term of actual service to Mr. Edward Covey ended on Christmas Day, 1833. So again, he started here, he started to give dates. He started to be it's a transformation, Okay, we have rebirth. When we are, this is a hero. There is a myth, of the American hero. The myth from rags to riches. What is rags? And this is Emersonian, by the way. From rags, from, a state of, austerity, a state of nothing. Then you become rich. This is individualism. This is how you are self-made. So here we have a hero who started his journey from rags to riches. And later what is the riches for him? It is having his own freedom. What is, the richness, what is this wealth for him is to have his own dignity, to have his own freedom. And think, this is clear in, yes.
Well, in this chapter, Sandy reminded me of Huckleberry Finn when he told Douglas to take that root and put it in his pocket, and then he would not get beaten from Jacoby.
I think, again here, the idea of food is revisited again. When he said, when the slaves were compelled to eat more than they need, It's very, I have said this mode of treatment is part of the whole system of Freud and inhumanity of slavery. It is too. The mode here adopted to discuss the slave with freedom by allowing him to see only the abuse of it is carried out in another thing. For instance, a slave loves molasses, he steals some. His master in many cases goes off to town and buys a large quantity. He returns, he takes his whip and commands the slave to eat the molasses until the poor fellow is made sick. Like, you have to eat this until you are made sick. Look. Very, very brutal. This is the longest chapter, I think. The idea of religion, the idea of, religion, the idea of solidarity, because here we're talking about how, he's not taking white people enemies, He's like, the enemies are the racists, themselves. Again, in this chapter, he assumed the role of a spokesman, the role of a leading role. He started to say we, he started to talk on behalf of, other slaves. So if you remember, this is like a stylistic, issue. Like, we are shifting from the I to the we, because he's assuming this one. Okay. This is a very long chapter. Huh?
Like a repetition for
The escape plan and how he escaped the first time and he got in jail. And then he escaped another time. So it's all details here. The plan and what time he got jail and they knew.
And I say, we're not done.
It's full of
This narrative is full of motifs, full of conflicts. We have this search of identity, we have the family theme, we have the freedom theme, we have the individualism, we have a lot of American features, we have symbolism, we have fictionality, we have conflict, and I can bank on you, you can develop this narrative by your own.
that when he finally gave his freedom,
Yeah.
he was not as happy as we thought he was. He was
Yeah, because
alone. And that brought us in the previous chapters. Many slaves did not leave their slaveholders because they didn't want to departure from their friends and their families.
And also in New York, he found that slavery was there, but in disguise. It was hidden, It means they have to continue this fight, until they reach Martin Luther King, Martin Luther King, yes. The one who was fighting because he said 100 years later, the Negro is not still free, And it means and he was right, here, he was right when, slavery was legally cancelled, but it was, in reality, it was practiced, And I don't want to say it is until today. There are a lot of racist people,
Yeah, it's rare to find a black woman with married to a white man, even in America,
Yes.
or vice versa.
Yeah, it's very strange.
They stick together
Yes, the last point.
It is ironical that America is celebrating the 4th of April, which is the Day of Freedom, when they are the publisher of...
Yeah, and Martin Luther King in January, the day of King. They call it, King's Day. Martin Luther King in January. Anyway, it's very interesting narrative. Thank you very much for sharing with us, for participating. I wish, the other people at the back, were just, hey, we're here. But so let's see, in A Rose for Emily, they might do a better job. We'll see like Rosa for Emily and Hemingway next week. Thank you very much and see you next time.